The garden of kindness. Humans are special. Diplomacy tale. The Metinta was a world with a broken spine. The war had split continents and boiled oceans. The ash swirled up and down the troposphere, making sunsets bleed orange. In the crater-sheltered basin where the human colony took root, neat lines of irrigation cut the black soil into ribs. Crops broke through like green stitches on a wound. Ethan Cole walked those lines at dawn. He liked the hour when the planet held its breath. His boots sank into loam, and the sensors along the drip hose blinked a patient blue. He bent to check a leaf-good turgor. Minimal scorch when he sensed he was being watched. On the berm, a Drethi woman stood motionless, carrying more silence than weight. Her eyes, faceted like polished glass, caught the weak sun. A threadbare shawl hid the glow that meant hunger on her kind. Behind her shadows, 3 smaller shapes. Ethan straightened slowly and raised a hand, open palm. Morning, she didn't respond. Drethi language had a clipped cadence. He'd learned the basics from the settlements tab. He tried, safe ground here. Her jaw tightened. We do not beg. Good, Ethan said. I don't have a beg line. He crossed to the shed, pulled a short-handled spade, and set it on the berm between them. You look like you could scold a stone into behaving. Think you can scold weeds. One of the shadow's small, thin arms, flared cheek, ridgeous beard round her legs, at the tool. The woman said, we do not. Garden, not yet, Ethan said, and smiled like it wasn't a thing that could be broken. I'm Ethan. She watched him as if names were traps. Then, Sailor. Welcome, Sailor. If you want to help, I'll pay you in food. No tricks, work's honest. Carrots are honest back. A long breath. The children's eyes tracked to a crate by the fence. Bread, wrapped in cloth, and misshapen tomatoes shining like small, ridiculous suns. Her voice lowered, rough with ground glass. I work in your garden, and you feed my hungry kids. Ethan nodded. That's the wage. She made no move toward the food. Instead, she picked up the spade. Show me where to start. They worked in parallel. Ethan taught by doing. Loosen the soil by the stem. Let the roots breathe. Pull the weeds slow, don't snap the tap. He showed how to lay straw so the water would not flee the surface at noon. He did not talk about charity. He did not talk about the war. At dusk, when the sky burned like a banked forge, he handed Sailor the bread and the tomatoes, and a small jar of protein paced with a handwritten label. Chickpea plus salt plus hope.SEYLA. Took it like a ritual object. The children stepped forward, uncertain, until she swept them behind her. A Ganna's, if kindness might bite. She held Ethan's gaze. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he agreed. That night, in the broken shell of a Drethi tenement, Sailor cut the bread with ceremonial care. Her children ate with the awe of the starving. Jory, the smallest, laughed at the tomato seeds on his lip ridges. The sound startled Sailor Joy, unhidden, like something wild returning to a place it had once known. She did not sleep. She dreamed a wake of rose in green and hands that did not bind. The bargain work has a way of making strangers into neighbors. Dawn after dawn, Sailor returned. Ethan learned to read the small shifts in her posture. This weed defeated me. This bed sings. He learned the names of her children, and he learned not to say them too loudly. Pride could snap, and he did not want to be the one to break it. He paid fairly. then began to pay inconveniently, extra vegetables buried under a pile of practical ones, a tin of spices wrapped in paper, a coil of new hose he claimed was left over. When she tried to refuse, he shrugged. "Can't eat money," he said. "Can plant a hose." Sailor learned things Drethi never learned. The old empire had hydroponics and protein vats, precise and sterile. Gardens had been for conquered worlds and propaganda murals. Now she knelt in dirt and felt the earth answer. Water, seed, patience. She discovered patience hurt less than hunger. One evening, she found Ethan crouched by a bed, thumb rubbing a leaf edge, spotty. She asked, leaning on the new word. "Fungal," he said. "We can fight it. Neem, vinegar, light to dry the undersides." Sailor's mouth quirked. "You fight things different than we did." "Yeah," he said softly. "Different wars." She hesitated, then sat in the dirt beside him, mimicking his posture. "My people," she said, and the words came like pulling barbed wire, "taught us that everything is exchange. Gain, loss, contract. You cannot give without taking." "Your people were wrong," Ethan said, too quickly, then winced. "Sorry, not my place." Sailor glanced at him. In her eyes, a new kind of dangerous curiosity. "Why do you feed us?" "Hungry kids don't care about old flags," he said. "And planting things feels better than destroying them." She considered, "But why me?" "You were the first to walk to the fence," he said. "Bravery deserves to be met halfway." Her eyes widened a fraction, as if he'd named something she'd hidden even from herself. She stood suddenly. "We should water the far rose." He didn't press. He never did. That was his strangest kindness. Word traveled through the Drethi quarter with the secret momentum of rumor. At first they spat when she passed collaborator, groveler. Then, quietly, one by one, the desperate came to the fence. Ethan did not turn anyone away. He had a way of handing a tool that made the person holding it taller. Marshall Oates visited twice a week, always with an eye on the horizon. "Heard you've started a revolution with Zuki," Oates drawled. "Got to start somewhere," Ethan said. "Watch the Drethi war bands in the North Quarter," Oates warned. "Some don't like this. Kindness fouls up a tyrant's mouth." Ethan nodded. "I'll keep an eye open." An arrow weeded, Oates sighed. "Sometimes I can't tell if you're brave or stubborn." "Little column A, little column B," Ethan said, smiling without showing teeth. At home, Sailor crushed dried leaves the humans called basil. Jory danced to the smell. Keth, her eldest, watched through the window at night when patrol lights cut the ash. He did not trust gifts. Drethi boys were taught not to trust anything soft. Tala drew on walls with charcoal rows and rows of green. "Garden," she whispered. "Garden." Sailor took a tiny seed from a paper envelope Ethan had slipped into her hand. "Amaranth," it read. She pressed it into soil in a chipped bowl. She did not know the word faith, but she practiced it. Asterisk. The threat kindness left to grow threatens the economies of fear. It began with rumors Drethi raiders stealing irrigation pipe up north. Then a human truck ambushed on the ash flats. Marshall Oates tightened patrols, and the settlement's radio traffic took on the wire-taut tone of men who smell a storm. Elder Irix came to the fence one afternoon, bones like knotted roots under his skin. He watched Sailor lay mulch the way a penitent watches an altar. "In my youth," he rasped, We burned fields to break enemies. We thought fire was the only teacher. His head lifted. This is a different lesson. Sailor's hands didn't still. The old lessons starved our children. Irix nodded, painfully slow. Then let us write new ones. That evening, Ethan found a sign gouged into the irrigation main near the road. 3 slashes, a Drethy warband sigil. He felt the small hairs rise on his arms. He'd seen marks like that in other places, before the ceasefire chalk on doorways. Soot symbols, warnings that a kindness would be punished. He told Oates. They arranged watchers. Ethan began sleeping in the shed 2 nights a week, rifle above the door. He hated it. He liked plants better than powder. But he knew that gardens need shepherds too. Sailor arrived at dawn to find him there, eyes red, coffee bitter in his cup. She said nothing, but where she moved that day. She moved between him and the road. The raid came when the rows were fat with promise. Vrash's warband slid from the ash like knives unsheathed. They wore the old empire's scavenged plates and swagger, hunger sharpened to cruelty. They moved fast, efficient, practiced on softer targets than this. They surged for the hoses and the seed vault. Ethan's shout was a blade through the morning. Down, he pulled Sailor behind the water tanks as the first shots chewed dirt. Oates' men returned fire from the berm. The Drethy workers froze only for a breath, long enough to remember they were supposed to run and, then. Keth did something nobody had taught him to do. He threw his small, wiry body over his brother and sister and crawled for the troughs. Vrash strode into view, crest painted with old victories. He aimed at the seed vault's lock with the practiced boredom of a man removing an obstacle. Ethan stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't raise the rifle. He just stood there, between Vrash and the vault, hands empty, as if his body were a new kind of wall. "Move," Vrash said, voice a rasp of mockery. "No," Ethan said. Vrash laughed without humor. "Humans and your stupid, soft words. Move or die." Sailor's shout cut the air. He glanced, contempt curling his lip ridges. Ah, the plant witch. Sailor stepped forward, every muscle singing with terror. "There are children here, and we were all children once." Vrash flicked his muzzle at the vault. "This garden feeds weakness. It makes the Drethy forget what we are." "What we were," Sailor said, voice low. "What we were nearly killed us." Vrash's crest flared. "And you would let humans feed our future. You would trade labor for crumbs." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Not crumbs, wages, work for food, food for strength. Strong families, strong streets. That's how you build the city." Vrash took a step, raised the rifle. "I recognize only strong hands and full guns." He never saw the motion to his left. Keth, thin and furious, launched from behind a trough with a length of pipe. He hammered the warband lieutenant's knee. The Drethy went down screaming. It wasn't a fight Keth could win. It wasn't meant to be. It drew eyes. It made shooters flinch. Oates' squad chose that opening. 3 precise shots, not to kill but to shatter the pipes near the raiders' feet. A geyser of water erupted, muddy spray blinding anyone who wasn't ready for it. Ethan had installed those pressure valves himself. He'd routed the line so a single burst would cut a field into fog. Down. He roared again, and workers ducked as bullets tore harmlessly into standing water. Vrash swore, swinging the rifle toward the boy. Ethan moved without thinking. He hit Vrash's shoulder first, driving him into the mud. The guns. Vrash scrambled, slammed an elbow into Ethan's ribs, and hissed, "You think dirt will save you, farmer?" "Dirt saves everyone," Ethan grunted, and planted Vrash's face in it. Sailor grabbed Keth, dragging him behind the tank. "Fool," she sobbed, half love and half fury. "Beautiful fool." The fight cracked. Warbands count on fear to hold a shape. Kindness had already warped this one. Workers hold hoses like ropes, lashing ankles. Drethy women, who had never been allowed near war, moved like weather and knocked men breathless with shovels. Oates's squad advanced methodically, non-lethal where possible, lethal when cornered. Vrash saw the tide turn. He spat mud and pried. "This is not finished." Sailor stepped out beside Ethan, chin high. "It is finished here. Go." Vrash's eyes slid to the children clustered behind the tank. For a heartbeat, something unreadable passed their regret or memory, or just the arithmetic of a leader who recognizes costs. He signaled retreat. The raiders slipped away, leaving trampled rows and a field full of panting, shaking survivors. Silence returned in pieces. Water trickled. Someone sobbed. Somewhere, a bird decided to risk a song. Ethan leaned against the tank, breath hitching, hand pressed to his ribs. Sailor crossed to him, eyes bright with heat. "You are a fool," she said, and then softer, in a voice he'd never heard from her, "and you are what you say your people are." "What's that?" She swallowed. "Kind," he smiled crookedly. "Help me stand. We've got to fix the valves before the noon cycle." Sailor stared, then barked a laugh that startled even herself. It sounded like a gate opening. She took his arm and lifted behind them. Keth stood straight, despite shaking legs. He looked at the humans, at his mother, at the garden steaming in the morning sun. He said one word, in Drethy, that had never fit in his mouth until now: home. Act 4, the Covenant Tree Building, is its own language. They spoke it together. The humans replaced pipe and patched the vault doors. Drethy hands repaired what Drethy hands had broken. Oates set a watch post near the road, but kept it small, respectful. A line painted not with fear, but with promise. No more raids. Work is sacred here. Elder Irix drafted a charter with Ethan on a crate by the fence. They wrote it in 3 scripts: human trade, Drethy, hieratic, and a phonetic scrawl children could read. It said, "This is a garden. Work here earns food. Children are priority. Weapons stay at the gate. Kindness is the law. Anyone who labors may eat." Irix tapped the wood with a knuckle like a gavel. "An empire is not only ships. It is what rules your days." Sailor oversaw a new section of rows. She had a map in her head now. She taught other Drethy what Ethan had taught her and what the dirt had taught them both. The words she used changed. "We must guard the seedlings" became "we must guard the little ones." "The soil is tired" became "my neighbor is tired." We expanded. Ethan and Sailor broke bread under the shade of the water tanks at midday. He told stories of Earth's oddities, pumpkin festivals, children in ridiculous costumes demanding sugar, old men who argued about weather like it was a religion. Sailor told him Drethy lullabies about moontides and river glass. He hummed while working. She eventually hummed with him. Some nights were hard. Jory woke crying from dreams of sirens. Keth flinched at sudden shouts. Once, a rumor spread that Vrash had been seen on the ridge. Work faltered that day. Ethan made soup and moved hoses. Sailor went to each row in turn and said the same thing, until saying it made it true. This is a garden. Here we plant. Here we eat. Tala's amaranth sprouted in the chipped bowl. She carried it like a holy flame. Humans from other basins came to see. They went home with notes and packets of seed and a softened look round the eyes. Drethi from broken quarters followed the water flows to the fence. The charter said what Ethan always had: if you work, you eat. It was a theology more powerful than flags. Oates came to the fence with a messenger drone on his shoulder. Word from orbit, he said. The Interstellar Council wants to certify this place as a relief site. Ethan grimaced. More paperwork. More protection, Oates countered. He glanced at Sailor. You've made it hard for folks to pretend we're monsters. Sailor held his gaze. You've made it hard for us to pretend you are. In the evening, a small gathering formed under the tanks. Humans, Drethi, and the unclassifiable category, gardens. Elder Irix cleared his throat. We do not have a word for what has happened, he said. In our old tongue, the closest is Taranless, the exchange that enriches both hands. Your word is shorter. He looked at Ethan. Kindness. Sailor stepped forward, palms open. We call it a covenant. We keep it together. She looked at Ethan, and in her eyes was the slow, dangerous warmth of a star you could chart your seasons by. Legacy years passed. Ash fell less often. Rain remembered its duty. The basin grew a skin of green you could see from the ridge, the sort of color you don't understand until you've had to imagine it for too long. Children grew into workers. Workers grew into teachers. The charter weathered, then was carved into stone. Plants changed the soil. The soil changed the people. Farther north, other gardens rose, stealing labor from warbands until conquest didn't pencil out. Vrash tried twice more to crack the basin, and twice more he found that kindness had made a city that could fight without savoring it. He faded like a story you tell to remember what not to be. Keth apprenticed with Oates, and learned to read a ridge the way Ethan read a leaf. Tala became a botanist with a Drethi name and a human stubbornness. Her amaranth went to seed and fed half a District 1 lean winter. Jory learned every song and refused to take anything seriously except dinner. Sailor and Ethan never used words neither of them owned. They stood close often and touched hands more than once. A Drethi bonding rite involved placing a palm over another's ribs to feel the heartbeat. One evening in late summer, when the wind smelled like baked dirt and tomatoes, Sailor did that. Ethan stood very still, and if he wept, he did it carefully, where only the basil could see Dot. Elder Irix died in the shade of the tanks, a pencil in his hand and a smile on his mouth. His last words were a Drethi proverb that didn't quite translate. People said he meant, I have seen seeds learn to be trees. The Interstellar Council sent a delegation to record the basin's methods. They wanted flowcharts and yield ratios. They got those, and they recorded other things too. A mural of children's handprints. A recipe for soup scribbled on the back of a logistics manifest. A charter in 3 scripts that had fed more mouths than any fleet. At a ceremony under a simple arch woven from old hoses. Sailor addressed a crowd of humans and Drethi and a dozen species who'd come to see what kindness built. When I first came here, she said, I expected chains. I found tools. I expected to be measured. I was met. She turned to Ethan. I said, I work in your garden, and you feed my hungry kids. That was the bargain. It is still the bargain. But we discovered the garden was not only the field. She touched her chest. It is also this. Ethan lifted the charter stone with oats and keth and set it in place. On it, a single line had been added over the years by many hands. In many scripts, the strongest walls are dinner tables. At dusk, when everyone had eaten and the planet held its breath the way it had the day Sailor first came to the fence, Tala's children ran the rows, chasing each other with amaranth plumes. Jory's laugh had not changed. Keth's stride had. The tanks hummed, full and faithful. Sailor set her palm over Ethan's ribs again. The beat is strong, she murmured. Garden work, he said, hard on the heart. Good for it too, she smiled, eyes bright. We wrote a new lesson. Together, he said. Above them, stars woke. In some lonely orbit, a satellite blinked a slow, approving light. Far away, on worlds that had never known Tarsis IV's ash, children learned a story about a garden where a woman worked and a man paid her in food, and neither was diminished by the other's gift. In those lessons, the word human took on a color that had nothing to do with flags and everything to do with dinner tables.